Oh, sorry, my apologies about that. What I was mentioning after showing the web page is that over here in apps, we have the different apps for each one of the uh, clinical specialties that each doctor practices. And all this software is multidisciplinary. So I started here with a case that I already have. And what we're going to do with this case is help ourselves with the guidelines to start looking at different information for our orthodontic treatment, and possibly if we have to do a gingival extension, or if rather than doing a complete orthodontic treatment, we see that it's better for one or another tooth to have a veneer, etc. So we select over here the guideline, and then we start placing it. At first, we're going to keep, as you can see, the movements are simultaneous on both sides. They're symmetric, which helps us do asymmetrical orthodontics for both right and left side. So right now, I'm just going to place the incisal guide with the speed curve. And then we're going to look at the best relationship we have with our photo. So we're going to place the symmetry guideline to see what are the best the best options. Sorry about that. The best options that we have regarding the facial features and the dental features of our patient. So what we want to do is that we want to align as best as possible. This patient is a bit symmetrical. There's a lot of patients which is harder, so we have to see the best balance. Then we can get to center our patient's smile. And what we do in this case is that we try to meet the ends of the eyes, the ends of the nose, and the distal border or the cusp of the canines. So this exterior vertical lines, what we do is that we try to match either the right or left side with that information. And then we come to our filtrum here and try to find the midline that best suits the facial features with the dental features. And before, we were looking also at the lip to see the shape that we can use of our incisal guideline. Okay, so after placing both of these guidelines, then we come back and fix our canines to have the best balance possible. And then we're going to use our ideal relations. Okay, here we have the ideal relations. It's the relationships between width of the canines, the lateral incisors, and the centrals. The centrals being our starting point. So here we can see the different percentages in the width. This is good for prosthodontics as well. And usually the golden proportions should be 50, 70, 100. Now, these are only proportions, and it depends on the patient. Okay, you don't have to follow them. It's only guides and that establish a starting point. So now, after establishing the width, what we do is that we establish the relationship between width and height. And this meaning that if this relationship is 100, what we're going to have here is a completely squared tooth. So here we have to take into account the shape of our patient. If it's an oval face, a square face, a round face, it should be usually between 75 and 85. But as I mentioned, it depends on the patient. You can also look at the zenith of the canines to see until where you would do a gingival extension in case that you would. And then finally, the MG curves is the papilla, which the use is basically to see the asymmetries that we have between right and left side. And then we do the upper limit, the gingival limit, also until the zenith of the canines. Now, limit is not the best word, like I mentioned before. These are not limits. It would be the gingival guideline. Okay, so once we've established it, we have the option of locking it so that uh, it won't move. And also we can create a mask. We're going to draw a mask here so that we can see the models right on top of our photo. Okay, so once that we're doing our movements, we can take into account the patient's facial features. And this way we are predicting with a lot of accuracy the end result, particularly with orthodontics, because we're going to make the movements with our aligners. Okay, so once we've drawn the mask, and we can do this for a multitude of photos. So if we want to see it from different angles, if we have time at the end, we're going to include different photos to look at it from different angles. But once we have our frame, we can go ahead and create the mask. And this way, we're going to be able to do the movements here. Now, what we do is that after the orientations, digital basis is only in the case that we want to close the model. In segmentation, what we do is that we place these planes between the mesial-distal borders and the center or the incisal edge of both the upper and the lower model. Then we segment the upper, we segment the lower, and then we look at the teeth landmarks. Now, by segmenting, we only need to check the contours. Each version is becoming more automatic, so you wouldn't have to look at the contours. But right now, we just take a look at the contours, we fix them, and then we go on to create our orthodontic treatment based on the facial features with the help of our guidelines. And if it's a case that it's completely additive, then you can create mock-ups and you can create veneers. But in this case, you would do probably also, you can create an ideal mock-up to do prep guides, okay? We don't have time for all of that, but that's the magic of using both Smile Design and orthodontics. So we're going to see here, basically fixed. As you can see, the contours are pretty much very well done. So we segment the teeth. The software is going to tell us if there's any error in any of the contours, so we can go fix them. Or if not, it's going to segment them completely. Okay, so in this case, it says between 18 and 17. Okay, so we're going to go to 18 and 17. These blue dots here are the papilla. And sometimes they are too close, or the contour, as we can see there, goes a little bit inside of the model, which we don't want. So now we have our segmentation. Okay, we have our upper segmentation. Then we do the same for the lower. Usually the lower teeth are a bit sometimes harder to work with, but we're going to see what we can do. Okay, looks good. Okay, let's try it. Okay, and we got our upper and our lower. And now we just come here to teeth landmarks, which are going to help us with all the measurements of the translation and rotation movements. Okay, here we're missing maybe some landmarks. So we just got to say, for example, here for 7 and 6, and also for left 7. So we just click here on upper manual, and the software lets us know. For example, here, the maxilla distal lingual is missing. So we place it. We can also change the dots that we want to change. And then it says the distal lingual over here on R7 as well. And as you can see, the boxes are being completed every time. Now 6, we don't have that tooth. And down below, everything is good. Here we can also import different, well, we already imported the incisal guideline. So I'm not going to change it. Okay, it's the same incisal guideline we were placing before. Yeah. And we can have a lower incisal guideline as well. In my case, I prefer to work first only with the upper incisal guideline. So now after we were done with this, this is basically the planning of the preparation of our case. And what we've done is basically oriented the models according to the facial photo so that we can do a facially guided design. We've placed guidelines that are going to help us align symmetrically between right and left the smile of our patient. And then we've segmented the models so we can do the movements of our teeth through the morphing of the gingiva. So we've prepared the case, and now we're going to go to do the planning of the case, to do the segmentation. Now, this is very interesting because the software has many tools to cover different specifics of it, because as you can see, the relationship of our bite is not the same relationship from our photo. Now, we can't see here because in both photos, I already did the mask first, but I'm gonna bring in another photo. And I'm going to match it so that we can see that the relationship is not the same, and to adapt it to that relationship. Okay, to adapt the upper model and the lower model to the actual relationship of the photo. So this is what we did previously, which we didn't see in the prepared case that I already had. You have to put at least 4 dots in common. I usually place around 4 or 5 to do the best fit, the best match. They have to match 5 with 5, 4 with 4, etc. And then we click here on build mapping. And then we check if the match is okay, which looks pretty good. And I apply the changes. Well, actually, I'm not going to apply the changes. No, I'm not going to apply the changes because I just want to see the relationship between the photo and the upper and lower, so we can make the changes that we need to make. Okay, so let's go back to the orthodontics planning. Let's see if this photo has been set. Do you want to apply permanently? No. I want to keep the same orientation that we had from the guides that I already have. I just wanted to add this photo to be able to look at the relationship and in the same position of the previous one, but it was not added. There we go. Let me see with the morphing. There we go. So here we can check it out. We can see there that the relationship is not the same. You see, so we have the tools to fix that. We can come here to our virtual articulator and we're going to use our upper model. And our lower model. And we're going to estimate the condylar landmarks. So we're going to click here, trace landmarks. We're going to place one on the incisal edge, one on the left molar, one on the right molar. And we're going to bring in the photo to be able to make that change. With this opacity here, we can see there that it's not related. So we're going to move this down to the right position. Okay, so we can use our photo to do our treatment. So there we have it. And what we do is that we save a relationship here. So I'm going to call this frontal. And I'm going to say, okay. And now I'm going to go to my setup. Now our case is ready. We have all the preparation that we need. We just need to select here what we want to use. So we're going to apply this relationship, this frontal relationship, apply. And with the photos, let's see if we have the mask here with our photo. Now I believe I mixed it up. So I'm going to create the mask once again so that we can start doing this. I don't think it's let me bring in a third photo one last time. Sorry about that. Okay, so we have the first photo and we do have our guidelines here and they do amount. So this is the photo that I need. Okay. Let's see here with the opacity. It's the photo that I need, but it's not matching my orientation. So well, in the end, I do have to apply the changes. The thing is that every time that I apply the changes, I lose my my guidelines. Okay, but no worries. We're gonna do this real quick. We're gonna place the guidelines once again. And using the same process we were mentioning before, remember we chose the normal one. Then our incisal guideline, our symmetry guideline. Okay, sorry about this, guys. Let me start over. I'm going to go to a case that is already prepared. And we're going to start where I wanted to start. I've been since very early in the morning looking at different cases, so I might have confused something. Sorry about that. So, okay, so this is a case that we already have the relationship that we had before. Okay, let's see if the pictures here are the corresponding ones. Yes, and yes. Okay, so here we have our guidelines relations and our ideal proportions and our MG curves. Now, I believe that the movements have already been made. In this case, let's go to the timeline and check. Yeah. So 1 second. So if this is the setup and this is the case prepared, oh, this is the last one that we saved. So that I want to show you how to do the movements using the photo and using the guidelines. I believe that we lost
We need to make share screen again.
the screen, right? Sorry about that.
Yes.
Let me share. I think you have it now. Is this correct?
Yes, we have now.
Okay. So in the setup, what we're going to do is that we're going to use our photo and we're going to use our lines. We have to fix the relationship here again. So I'm going to go quickly to the virtual articulator so that we can fix that relationship so that we're actually working with reality, the closest to reality that we can do so by taking advantage of this 3D tools. Okay, so let me see with the photo how we can lower this to the right position. And save the relationship. Okay. So now in our setup, we're going to use the photo with the new relationship. Okay, to be able to do our treatment. Let's check the guidelines. Okay, so now we're going to start doing the movements that we want to do. Okay, so here, for example, on our frontal view, what we want to do is that we want to start doing an initial adjustment to our guidelines. This is why we lock them so that they don't move. Okay. Okay, so those are just a few movements of translation. And as we're making these movements, the software is taking the information down. As you can see over here, it's saying how many we're going to medialize, how much we're going to protrude, how much we're going to intrude or extrude. So this will be the translation movements, and this will be the rotation movements. Now, if we go to our timeline, we see that the software is beginning to do the math. Okay, the software is starting to give us, according to these parameters, the amount of aligners that we're going to need according to these translation movements. Now, so far, I've only made translation movements, so that's why that's what it's showing. And we can change this according to the bone structure of the patient as we see their evolution, etc. So if we change it, we're going to see how this changes as well. So see, right now we had under 5 aligners, and now it goes up to 6 because I made the movements a little bit slower. Okay, so this is regarding the rotation and translation movements, and afterwards we can set also the the different sequence of the movements. So I'm going to go directly to a case that already has the sequence to the last case, which I believe is this one. Setup. Give me 1 second. I'm not sure if the reason that I'm having these problems is because I'm working on a different case. Yeah, yeah. Sorry about that. I'm gonna share the screen right now again, and that was my mistake. I was working on an older case, not on the case that we had for today. It's repaired. Yeah, I'm gonna share. I'm gonna share right now in just a little bit, Doctor. Uh, okay, so let's check it out. Okay, so here we have done. This is the case uh, completely prepared. I'm sorry I couldn't do this step by step right now, is that I was working on an older case. I apologize about that. But after the movements, we can check how the upper and lower is going to be according to our photo. Okay, we can check this. And in the timeline, we can go ahead and we can select when we want the movements to begin, in what position, both for the upper and the lower. So for example, here, the lower, we could come here and we could say, okay, I want my central lowers to start moving first, then followed by my laterals, then my canines, and then my molars. Okay, so we can change here, we can change the speed, we can change the sequence so that we can do our treatment a lot easier for our patient. Okay, and as well, once we've done this, we can see here, okay, in aligner number 44, it goes all the way to 15 aligners. So, okay, I'm going to bring this step a little bit closer and see if I can minimize the velocity. There I get an alarm. So we're going to minimize it only towards here. And this is the sequence that we're going to start using. And we're going to see the different movements over here. So if we bring everything, here we record everything. And if we bring everything to the beginning, we can see how the teeth move and if there's going to be any problem between them. You see, that is the initial movements. That is the initial relationship with the guidelines. And we can see how the teeth are fitting in according to the design, which we used our guides for to center our smile. Okay, now we're going to take off the guides so that we can look at this better. I'm just going to leave the symmetry guideline. Okay, so we can see. Well, sorry about that. I'm covering here the view. Let's do it again as I covered the view. Well, this screen we can take off. This one we need to keep on. So there we go. Here we can see the movements. Okay, so we can see from the beginning towards the end, what's the difference between our patient's smile and the end result. Okay, so that's basically what we generate. And then we have other different viewing tools as well as IPR tools. So in this case, if we go back over here to our setup, and we select here which teeth we moved, so we can see which teeth we moved, which teeth we didn't. We can select the initial or the setup. So here, for example, in this case, as you can see from the model, it's not a complete additive case. So it doesn't make sense here to do an orthodontic mock-up or to make veneers to motivate our patient, because our orthodontic treatment is not just additive. In this case, what we can do is that we can bring or we can add more material to the additive places if we want to create a mock-up that is motivational for our patient. Or if we want to prep the teeth of the patient, we can also create guides that show where we need to prep and how much we need to prep. So for example, in this incisor, we would not need to prep this area, but we would need to prep the other. So we have all these tools here, and you can also see in the timeline, the good thing about the timeline is that you can also see the interproximal overlaps. So by changing the sequence of the movements and by also making them longer or shorter, you can also avoid or reduce doing interproximal overlaps. So right now it's going to show us all the information about the overlaps. And then we can also see a summary of information. So if we click here, we can see that we've avoided most overlaps, except here. Look at this big one. Okay, so let's see what we can do. For one thing, I'm going to make the movement a lot slower, both of them. Actually, maybe we're going to rotate first, and then we're going to make the movements. And let's see if just by that we can reduce this interproximal reduction. So if we can minimize it, or if we can send it a little bit to other teeth and not to have all of it concentrated here. So mathematically here, you can try, I don't know the biomechanics. For those of you, you see how much it was reduced? With the information of the biomechanics of the movements of the teeth with the aligners, you can see how to make, and without actually extending our treatment. We're up to 12 aligners, and we try to keep it that way, but trying to make it as comfortable as possible for the patient. If we cannot, by the sequencing or the velocity change, you see, now what I did was push it to the other side. So maybe in this case, this tooth does not help to extend this. So we might have to, for example, change the movement, the translation and rotation. In my case, as I don't know the biomechanics, I'm doing it by trial and error. But if you do know the biomechanics, then obviously, depending on the patient that you have, you're going to know how to make the movements. And if you want to see the movements in detail, you can also see them in detail. And we can apply the interproximal reductions and also see where we're going to need attachments. So now it went back up here. So let's see if by putting both, I'm going to try one last time. And if not, we're going to do the interproximal reduction or the extrusion if it were necessary. Okay, so now if we exit and we want to see them visually, we can take this timeline, this green line, for example, to before step 3, before aligners 3, and I want to see it over here, the different spacing labels, and it's looking good. See all those zeros? We don't have any over here. If we go all the way to the end, we're going to see that this is minimal, this is minimal. We reduced the last one for a bit. So here, this is comma 35. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of interproximal reduction there. We're going to do comma 15 or comma 17 and comma 18. So we select here tooth number 32, and I say add IPR, and between 32 and 31, this would be the mesial border. So I'm going to say here a comma 17. Okay, and then I'm going to go to 31, and I'm going to add an IPR, in this case on the distal side, comma 18. And now, if we look at the graph, now we've reduced it. We've reduced our interproximal reduction. And we can also see here where we can reduce it better. So maybe we can do an IPR before aligner 6 and then an IPR on 31 after aligner number 8, and thus reducing. We have the original graph here and the other graph down here in the bottom. Okay, so we reduced it. If we see the overlap, we reduced it, and the most that we have is 0,12 here. So let's even bring this a little bit farther, and there we go. We have almost nothing. So this is how we do the interproximal reductions to avoid them, minimize them, view them, get their information. And if we want a summary of each one of the aligners, this I'm going to get the summary for the end. But if we come here, we can see the movements. And those red movements are the movements that are the harshest. Okay, so here we would need to consider either placing attachments or extending our treatment. So let's see which teeth do we have. We have, I'm gonna take a photo, and well, you guys can't see because the thing about Zoom, if you switch from one to another. So, but on 44, 35, 31, and 42, those are my harshest movements. So maybe I can go back to my treatment and extend it a little bit in the case of our lower teeth. Okay, so 35, it said it was really harsh. So we're going to extend all these movements to make them more mellow for the patient. If we want to see the exact type of movement, we can also do that. But let me just see how our summary changes after doing this differently. And then we're going to add attachments where we need to add attachments and look at our final treatment on our simulation and the movements. And the movements will barely be noticeable, at least on the lower model, because I've extended them until the last movement. It's taking a long time. I don't know why. It's not usually. Maybe sometimes it's because it's not good to have a lot of things on the screen. Let's see if we can take them off, and maybe it goes a little bit faster so we can wrap it up. I apologize for the problems at the beginning, but I hope you're being able to see the general idea of how smile design may help your orthodontic treatment. What I'm doing here is that I'm telling the software this is the final movements that I want. Okay, so let's see over here. We're good. Okay, so I'm going to take off this spacing labels, and let's check the summary now that we changed. Well, it's still not looking good. So we're going to add attachments. For example, we are looking at 44 on the rotation here. So what we do is that we go to tooth number 44. I'm going to do it since the beginning. And we place the guideline right there. And we say, okay, tooth number 44. I need to place an attachment here because your movement is really hard and I don't want to extend your treatment. So the mouse is going to let us know on what tooth we can place that attachment. We select the type of attachment that we want. And then here we can select the type of aligner that we want to work with according to the space that we have available within the patient. Okay, so we can also copy and we can paste, we can mirror, we can save the attachment, etc. Anything that we need, we can place it. And we place the attachment right at the beginning. So we're going to end the modifications. And then I'm going to go all the way to the end of tooth number 44 and remove them. I'm going to remove them both here. And all this information is stored on your summary. So once you want to bring to your movements, you can see the setup summary here, where we're going to start and we're going to end our attachments, for example, in step number 1 and step number 12, and where we're going to do our interproximal reductions. And you can also send this to a PDF, whether you want to save it on under your patient's file. The PDF gets saved right under Nemo, so you have all the information here. You can have it per aligner. Remember, you just need to place the timeline, the vertical green line on the aligner that you want, and you get the information. This is the final information. Obviously, this is not a clinical treatment, but we can have all that information that we want to look at. And once we're ready and we want to see it on our patients' faces and see how they're going to change, we can go ahead and bring in, we take everything back to 0. We bring in the photo of our patient. I'm going to zoom in here so you can see better. So this is the initial state. And let's play some more guidelines to see how the guidelines helped us. Just a little bit. The incisal guideline, for example. And I don't know if you want to see the ideal relations or the ideal proportions. No, let's just leave these two so that we can have a nice view. So we press play and we can see the movements for each one of the aligners when the attachments, you see that's our interproximal reduction. The attachment is here. That's our second interproximal reduction. The attachments are still here. So that means we're before step 12. Now the attachments are gone and we've centered the smile for our patient. If it was a completely additive case, we could do a mock-up here. And what we would do is that we would join the teeth and the base, we would use the model. Now, in cases that it's not additive, it's not going to give you a good result. Okay, so, but you can do an orthodontic mock-up in case that you're going to extrude a little bit, vestibularize most of the teeth. And as I was mentioning before, you can look at all the different types of movements by clicking on this icon. But yeah, now my computer today is a bit bad. I'm just gonna show you that last part real quick, as I know that we're out of time. We have just a couple more minutes left, but I just want you to see that you can also look at all the movements. Okay, there we go. So this is the PDF of our summary. If you have the DICOM, like I do here, you can also segment the roots to see the movements within the X-rays also taken from the DICOM. So that is very useful as well, depending on the case that you have, to see if the root movement is going to be too much. But what the last thing that I wanted to show you is that you can see all the movements divided in components. So if we click OK here, we're going to see not just that it's a translation movement or a rotation movement, but what type of movement. So we can get to that detail with our series. So for example, I want to mesialize, lingualize, rotate, tip, and torque. As the most that you know about biomechanics, the easier it's going to be to do this setup. Or basically, by your already clinical knowledge, you can see how you can extend or move your movements, basically, so that you make the treatment as quick as you can, as symmetrical as you can, and as comfortable as you can for the patient, by using both Nemo Smile for smile design and Nemo cast for orthodontics. Okay, so that is my session for today. We have just a couple minutes for any questions. If anybody has any questions, I apologize for the things that went wrong at the beginning, and that my computer is working a little bit slow today. But this is the idea behind having both orthodontics and smile design related. So here we can switch relationships again, etc. Okay.